So welcome to Bunny's Designs. This is a live Thursday show. I'm working in my Hanna Karlzon with the Derwent Graphik liner pens. These are full of acrylic ink, and I'm trying to put them in a ceramic dish, and I'm blobbing. So I've got a blob again, and instead of wasting this gorgeous colour, I'm using it in the Hanna Karlzon book that I have before. So every time I've used these and I get a blob, I'm kind of using these. Now I'm a bit wetter than normal, but the Hanna Karlzon books can take this little bit of kind of, they can take a little bit more water, but it's only just a damp brush. And then because it's a rigger, it continues, and that's where we get the watercolouring effect. In fact, I'm not dunking it in water at the moment. I've got a makeup sponge, which is I kind of like that bit that goes to nothing, so I'm going to leave that. Under here is a bit darker. So I still want to make a good job of the colour page, but I'm using, and I've got this blob on this side. And normally they say on the, when you watch YouTubers that use these, artists that use these, they say, oh, what you do is you pull the nib out and you wipe it, and you wipe it all away and you wash it all away. Well, this tight Yorkshire lass doesn't. And so I end up with some lovely watercolour effects, because I'm using, you don't normally go over it twice. So we've got another one here, but this is the Clockwork Orange. But because I'm watering down that blob, I'm getting a kind of from a tangerine gamboge to a very pale. And if you did small sections at a time, you'll get that watercolour effect. And I've nearly used all that blob up. So I've used the blob up, but I haven't finished my colour page, even though it's a quick one. So what I do is I take the damp brush, and there's still some colour under here, so I'm going to tap it on its bottom here, so the colour goes back in. But now I can pick up all this colour, and I will go right round until I've picked it all up and used it all, and you probably find that's enough to do a colour page. Now I can go back in there and add other colours, but it's just the fact, and because it's kind of rush and wet, wetter than we normally work, or wetter than I normally work, you find some really nice effects that you wouldn't get if you were kind of more fussy with it. So I'm trying to just have a damp brush and gently spread colour. Now I did go over there because my hands are getting bad at the minute, they're worse. So this is the Hanna Karlzon Daydreams. And I'm just using it because I've got this blob of paint on the end, and I'm using these particular paints in a completely different way in Joanna Basford Ivy and the Inky Butterfly. There I'm being more precise. I'm doing colour mixing, two colours together to create some unusual effects. But when you're using these pens, they are designed to blob, even though I don't like them blobbing. They are designed to use wet on wet with watercolour paper and be very messy and very free. Well, I want to use these beautiful, strong, gorgeous acrylic inks. And I've found a way to make them a watercolour. Or I'll rephrase that, you can reconstitute them, which if you let this dry, you cannot. If you let this dry on your nib, you cannot reconstitute it, and they can kind of bung up a bit. So if you're getting to a point where I've cleaned, oh no I haven't, I've got a blob on the back, you see, you can always turn it around and find some more. You do want a damp brush, so every time I'm going back for some more water, and you can almost clean the entire nib. And if you want it a bit stronger and we've nearly finished, you can just push down that area there, and that's where the ink, a lot of the ink comes from if you blob. So you can actually carry on if you just run out, but I kind of like that. I think I've done every single one. And I do have a little bit of yellow on my, I'm going to put the lid on, and I don't clean mine. Nope, that was the second one, that one. I do have a little bit of yellow, so I'm just going to look to see. There isn't a lot. I think I'm just going to touch this little bird here. I think I'm just going to touch that. So I've got a beautiful soft yellow, and even with a strong colour it would have taken me a while. So all this is dry now. So now I can go back to my second blob. So I'm trying to get these watercolours, these acrylic inks, I'm trying to make them into a kind of a watercolour. So if we take a damp brush and we mix this, it's actually going back into a watercolour even though it's drying. And that's what I want. I want to make it a watercolour. So you need a little bit of water with it. If it's too concentrated, it won't do that, but with a little bit of water. So again, we can mix that one and we've got the watercolour. I'm going to have a bit more of that one because I did have a bigger blob in that one. But what I've done is I've made them, and once they've dried, I don't need to use the pens again, so that's quite nice for my hands. So the next one is Tom, and as you can see again, they need to be shaken. So there's number 3. It has that ball bearing in it, and the first time you use them on the day, so I haven't used these for a couple of weeks, a few weeks. Now as you can see, it's already blobbed as it's come out, so I want to put some clear water, and it's a bit orangey that, but it's fine. It's when it's the very palest one I didn't want to do that. Oh, just run out of room. So I've made that quite wet, and then I'm just going to run that in. Now what's going to happen in a minute, because it always happens, is you get a blob. Now if you push down, if you were using these in a traditional way, you push down, you get a blob. So I've got a bit of colour there, but in a minute now I'm going to have a big blob, and you'll see the colour change. So I didn't want to do a blob. There's a blob. I didn't want to do a blob, but so there's a blob. And now the whole of the nib is covered. So they tell you that you have to clean that. So I'm just going to wipe that because I don't want that on my book. I don't think I want those orange or red. I think I want those purple. So I'm going to find some more flowers. So we've got some flowers here. So the idea is, when I have a blob like this, I use, and I'm going to have a smaller brush this time, I'm going to use my number 1, actually I might go smaller, I think I might use my 2-0, and I have a sponge which is saturated, so every time I bend it and draw backwards, I dampen the brush, and I'm picking up this colour from this blob, and then it's very strong and it'll get weaker. That actually is the wrong size. I think I need, try with the number 1 brush, and again touch a small amount, and then get some beautiful effects. You have to dampen your brush every time and draw it on a baby wipe, but it's almost worth it for that lovely, very, very acrylic ink strong, and then it goes paler. So if you have a paler area that you think, you can start that way if you want, but I like to start in the middle. And they tell you to wash this nib out, so you would technically be washing all this colour down the drain. And again, as a tight Yorkshire lass, I just love the fact, and it's a completely different way that I am using them in Inky and the Butterfly. Inky and the Butterfly, I'm being very precise, I'm using colours very softly, but here, instead of just chucking this down the drain, I'm being very rough, very free. Every leaf is, every one is different. I want that to be a little bit stronger, so I don't go for water, and because that's going to be underneath. Now sometimes you get a big blob on here, but I don't think we did today, so that's okay. And if you end up with too much colour, you won't get a watercolour effect. But again, I'm not really bothered about that. The idea is I'm just not wasting this wonderful colour. So I can colour 2 different types of book at the same time and not waste any. Now it does mean, of course, that if you want to work in your Inky and the Ivy Butterfly, Ivy and the Inky Butterfly, you've got to wait till you've used all the paint up, but I can live with that. I can do this page, all these flowers will use up all that blob, but I'm also trying to experiment and make a watercolour palette that will dry and be reconstituted. Now sometimes you might have thought that took hours to do. So again, just touch and away we go. And sometimes the colour is quite soft, and then if you know it's going to be darker, put it at the bottom, and then that creates a natural highlight, because the same amount of colour is going to be lighter up there. If you think the brush is too damp, you can get another one out of it. But I've done quite a few pages like this now, so I kind of know what I'm doing, but it took a couple of goes. I'll show you the blobby bits when I was using them. I think there's a couple of videos, and I started on houses because they were the ones that I would least want to colour for some reason, and yet I actually love them now. So again, sometimes you can be inspired by the page, or you can be inspired by what you're using. So that's quite dark and it's getting paler. And every leaf is kind of different. So I'm just going to work my way round, because the other thing is I will forget what colour I used. So I'm going to do all these flowers. So this video will be 2 for the price of 1, because you'll have Ivy and the Inky Butterfly, and then you'll also have working in the Hanna Karlzon Daydreams. And I have another one there, so and of course you can't judge how much blob you're going to get. You can either have a massive one. I've had one that's dropped in the bottom of the dish, and I think I did 2 pages from that one, whereas this one, it's just a little blob. But there is a way to get more colour if you want to finish the page. Now I might not want to do that. If you tap backwards, so you're tapping it so that the ink is going to go back in, sometimes you can save quite a lot of colour. But being acrylic ink, you really need to get most of that off there. So I'm kind of enjoying myself now. But a neat trick is if you touch just there, that's where the colour comes out. So if you find yourself running out of colour and you want to finish the page, damp brush, and then you can pick the colour up and use it. There'll always be colour there if you put a damp brush there, because that's where the colour comes from. If you want a stronger colour, you can pick that up and leave a nice soft effect. Word of warning though, I'm only showing you, don't work over you. Don't keep your pen over your work, because it's an acrylic ink and it can blob, and if it blobs you might destroy your whole page. I'm just showing you because you can see what I'm doing. So again, that one out to there. I think that's a leaf, that. Have you got any questions? So thanks for watching. This is a live Thursday show from Ustream, and hopefully it will upload to YouTube for everybody in YouTube to watch. So thank you to all my subscribers, and if you have any comments or any requests, pop them in the link below. I will link these graphic pens. You can buy them in 5s, you can buy them in individual, and you can buy them in the full set of the little pack of 20. And you can also mix colours together, so they're quite nice, but they are definitely not designed for colour books. But because they are so vibrant, they are an acrylic ink. If you use a damp rigger, you can get this wonderful effect of and it's not a watercolour effect, it's definitely an ink effect. This is an acrylic ink. I'm just hoping I can get them into to dry as a watercolour, because they're just going to be a bit easier for me to use when I use them in watercolouring, which is completely different to this. So again, if you find that you want a bit more colour, damp brush, just touch, and that should be a lot stronger. It isn't always. Everyone is different, and it's quite nice to sometimes have that. So we've cleaned all that now. You can tell when we touch it we don't get anything, so go back into the pen. And it's a lot of a looser way to work as well, so you get some strong effects. And some pale ones. So again, I love that. It's all different. So thanks for joining me, guys. Hope you're all okay. It's getting to be tea time in the UK, so our light's going. So you wouldn't think all these colours would be coming just from one pen. And I did turn all my lights out because I was having a spot of bother, but let's see if we can get them back again now. It's behaving now. It's something to do with the light on an evening. They suddenly start to misbehave and flash out, and it doesn't matter what you do. I did want that paler because always your lights are lighter next to a dark and your dark are darker next to a light. So always try to put a highlight next to a shadow, because they complement each other more and stand out more. Your lights will look lighter and your darks will look darker. And because I want to finish this, I'm actually using the ink that's just down there, because that's where all that ink comes from. And if you very carefully just stroke a damp brush, it will pick up just the right amount of colour. If it wasn't a damp brush, it would pick up a lot stronger colour. So I've got 3 more at that side, and again you can do them each individual petal, and you can do some near and some far to get different effects, or you can do, you find a technique that you like. Now this is fairly quick, this. You can't mess about because your ink is going to dry on the pen, and we don't really want it to do that. But it's just a way, instead of doing what they say and wash the ink away, we're using it very quickly in our colour book. And if you do get a blob and you put it, it's obviously in a dish, then again we're dried up now. You want to add a touch of water, not much, just a touch, and what that will do is it will allow it to dry, and then when you're ready to, you can reconstitute it. And that's what part of this video is. So we've got 4 more flowers to do, so again just touch in there, and it's going to be quite dark. It's a bit wetter than I normally like to work, but again this Hanna Karlzon colour book is very, very good for that. So I've got a lovely pale highlight on that one. Have a nice pale highlight on that one. So I like that one to be pale, which makes me think that that one might be dark. Now remember, just like any other watercolour, even though it's only just barely damp, if you touch one area next to another, and it's still damp, which it shouldn't be, but it could be, it will run just like it would. So sometimes you might want to work just for a few seconds on another side. So we've got this one here. And the last one, I think, we've managed to clean all that. Yep, it's all clean off the top there. So we'll leave that pale. So just double check we've got all the flowers. So I've coloured all those flowers from the blob on there, because I'm making these acrylic inks into a bit of a watercolour. So I'm going to just and then when I've got them into a watercolour, I'll be using them in my Hanna Karlzon. So we've got the next one is called Herring, and again I haven't used it so you can see through them because I haven't used them, so you need to shake them, and that's kind of a pinkier one, pinkier red I think. And again I want to make this, so I'm using an old brush. I think I'm going to put quite a bit of, well, 4 lots on that one. Again, if you can, open it away. Now I've got, I don't think I've got a blob. You can see there's no blob there, but you'll see when there is a blob. Now you can have it that pale if you want. There's a blob. In fact, there's 2, so I'm just going to tap back. So I've got 2 blobs there, and on this side here I have some bigger flowers, and if I show you over the top you can see that's quite wet. So I've got to be a little bit careful now. Going to number 2, Graduate Daylorani number 2, because it's a bigger leaf. Sorry, a bigger petal. Just touched very carefully, but there's so much colour. Again, a damp brush, touch so much colour. But we can have that very strong to that beautiful soft. That's quite strong, is that one? I've just touched it a bit too much, so we'll just go behind there. So you can do it either in smaller sections and then you won't get any buckle at all, and as I say, sometimes you just touch and you know you've got too much water, so damp brush, bit of a touch, and then drag that to be, oh, I think that wasn't actually a thing, was it? No. Again, that's a stronger one. The brush wasn't as damp. Yeah, you can always do it. You need to do it really once and twist, because if you try to do it twice, the rigger isn't wet enough to get all the way around. But again, it's a different way to work, and it looks totally different to what I'm used to working. So again, I like that. and all the leaves look completely different, so it's very loose. Now you could probably go back in there tomorrow or the day after if you wanted to. You could go back into there with the same colour or a different colour, and you can go back in with the inks and kind of have a right good old play. But you can't go back in yet because one is it's an acrylic ink and it's also wet, and that page we want to dry overnight. And again, you could use a hairdryer, but I like to be just peaceful. A nice peaceful way to work. That should be quite strong, that one. And then we're still trying to clean up. There is a little bit on the outside, but I'm going to have a soft one for that, I think. So this one down here I'm going to have a bit stronger because I've seen on the actual, not on the nib anymore, there's quite a lot of ink, acrylic ink that's sitting there. So every time you've got to dunk your brush for this. But again, you can get some quite nice effects. And sometimes you get a lot of blob, sometimes you get a little drop. As I said, I'm using this up because I want to create. That's a big one over there, that one. So I don't know if it's the same flower. Actually, I don't think it is the same flower. It isn't, it's completely different. So I'm going to do this one and then I'll leave that one. So pick up the colour, see if we can clean that brush a bit more. That was quite strong behind that. And you could get used to this and think, but again, this is the quick way. This isn't the kind of artistic way. This is just that we're not wasting this gorgeous ink and we're not wiping it away. Whereas you normally just kind of get a cloth and wipe all that away. But you would only see the very vivid, strong colour. You wouldn't see this beautiful, soft pinks. So I think we've got most of that off there now. Oops, no. Again, you see it's a bit stronger there. The same strength, but the brush was that little bit wetter. Oops. The other nice thing about this, and this is what you can do with them, and this is what I've been doing with Inky and the Butterfly, is splattering. That's what these are what they're designed to do, to splatter. I've decided I think I'm going to actually colour this one in pink. I think I've decided there's still some colour left on here, so I shall just do this one pink. But that's what I used it for the Inky and the Butterfly with, because it's an acrylic ink, and I could splash and make inky marks because I thought that lent itself. And normally completely different to what I normally do. Normally I don't like to do that to a colour book, but obviously the Butterfly is making inky splodges everywhere, so it works quite well. So this time if you have your brush over the top, it doesn't matter because you can splash. What we don't want to do though is create too much ink on there, because we're trying to clean it rather than mess it up. So we've got some splashes of ink on there, but that works quite well, I think. And it's almost clean, so it can go back, and the colour is drying. I'm getting a bigger blob every time I come out, but that's all right. So the next one is called Blood, and again you can see it definitely needs shaking. So this is going to be a dark red. So I'm really quickly going to look for, found some, I think they'd be dark red, but actually I quite like them. I think I'm going to do those. I do have a building, but I'm going to keep the greys for that. Yeah, I think I'm going to do this one. So again, we're going to try a blob. So I want my cheap paintbrush for mixing, so I'm going to put 4 blobs in there. So 4 dollops of water. It's not too wet, but it's wet. Shake, and then I'm going to be very careful, because you can open it and have a blob. So when you touch it, you know there's a blob. Now there isn't a blob, you can tell, although there's really nice pale colours. So I'm going to push it down. That's what you do to get a blob, and tap. And all of a sudden we will get a blob. There's a blob, and I think we can have 2 blobs. Right. Oops. And now we can see it's definitely covered in ink. So I'm just going to put a little bit of water around there. Remember, this is an acrylic ink, but I want to make it into a watercolour. So we'll go back to our huge leaves. Going back to our, this is a big leaf, so I've got our number 2 Daler rigger. Damp brush, and I'm just drawing back on a face sponge, which is quite damp. So I'm just going to touch some colour, and away we go. Again, it's very quick this. You've got to be fairly quick, because if you're not quick, and again, I really could have done with maybe a slightly bigger brush. This one's number 3. Now I don't like these for one reason, and that's they are sable, and they tend to be a bit too wet. Oh, I'm not going to use the sable. Sorry, it's acrylic ink. I'm going to use a synthetic. I have a Pro Art 103 number 6, and there's probably not a lot in it. So when it's wet and it's twisted, drawn back over a damp, it's quite a nice big brush, just what we want. Touch of colour, and then we can. And although it's damp, what it's doing is it's just releasing a small amount of water, and that's why I invented watercolouring, because it's watercolouring with a damp rigger. This is a rigger, but it's a bigger one, but it's only releasing a little bit of water. Now there's probably a little bit more water than we would have there, but I say this Hanna Karlzon one can do this. So a barely damp brush, touch the colour, and then draw that back. Now I suppose we could do this. I know this would be quite nice on the Linda Ravenscroft Fairies, because that's watercolour paper. Actually, that might look quite nice. So I might do one of those next. But the main idea is to try and make these into a watercolour. And they should actually be purple, but I think I kind of like them like this. So we've got a bit of a mishmash here going on. We're creating a palette of beautiful, strong watercolor, acrylic watercolors, which is a contradiction in terms, really. And then we've got, I think, oh, that's green, isn't it? So that we can then be creative in our Ivy and the Inky Butterfly, and just touch that a little bit so it's slightly darker than the other. Oh, sorry guys, got that silliness again. That's better. So we have another huge one here, and don't worry about the greens because I've got the greens to do. So I'm dunking on there and drawing the brush over this. You can see it's saturated. So I use the lid of the Elizabeth Arden face cream because it's like an inky well. So that's the water pot, and this holds a face sponge. You can use a baby wipe or a face wipe. I'm getting rid of my baby wipes and just using face wipes. When I've used them, obviously not with makeup, just generally, every night and every day before I apply face cream, the baby wipe goes into an empty pot and it becomes dried, and then I use it. I did want a bit more colour on the end of there, that's better. Now this is quite a large brush, so we can kind of see what's going on. And then at this side we've got another one. So dunk the brush, make sure that it is damp, and again, the bigger the space, the bigger the brush. So I started with a 0, 10, 0, and now I'm on a size 6. And so watercolouring works and all the way, but this is actually quite good. This is not for Bible journaling. This is just a bit too wet for Bible journaling. And I normally put something over the edge there, but if I come back now, I can get a nice darker bit under there. And tap, and it's nearly all gone. There is kind of a bit of gunk on there. See, it touched the tissue, and look how much came off, because it wants to do that. So we've got 5, we've got 15 to go, but I won't do them all on this video because it'll be an hour. So we've got our bright colours, and next one is pink. So I'm going to go back to, I want that for purple. This was the red one that blobbed, and I did all this one with a blob. There's some nice big pink flowers. So even though you're creating something, and you can do the same when you're working with watercolours. So again, you can see right through that, and you can see it running. So we need to shake it. If you haven't used them for a day, you shake them. Oopsie. So this particular acrylic palette is quite shiny, so I'm hoping it's not. So I did about 4. You want about 1/4 of the actual acrylic ink with water, and then it will mix. So again, you know, that's what I normally use, I actually want a blob. That's a blob. So I'm not doing another blob. I've got one. So tap the pen on its bottom. So you're technically trying to tap all that colour back down. The acrylic ink isn't going to dry because it's going to dry a watercolour because it's got a lot of water to it. And now I'm going to touch this, and this should be quite strong. And you find, obviously, if you don't want to do it in a watercolour way, you can just work in a different place, and it's going to get paler and paler and paler. Or you can try and do a watercolour effect. Now we probably won't get a watercolour effect because this is a smaller area and I didn't go to a smaller brush. But that's fine, I just won't get that lovely watercolour effect because it's too wet too soon. But you can work quite well and quite quick, and you can get some quite nice effects as well. So again, if you come back on something like this, you get the pale, and then touch it and you get very strong. And you get slightly more use out of your brush. So the more you do, the more you realise how you can use your brush. So I know I don't have to go back for water because this is such a huge damp brush. But I won't get that watercolour effect. I won't get that light to dark. I'm going to get a whole petal the same. So I have to go work in a different place. And I've purposely left the edges and I said you can go back. Oops, some more water on that one. You can go back. I seem to have cleaned that rather well. I kind of like that. That's another way to work. I didn't, Suzanne, but it works quite well this time. It's working quite well because it's saturated, and I'm working a lot looser. This is really loose and flowy for me, but I never used to like it, and this may buckle, but again, this is the quick way of working. This is because I don't want to waste this gorgeous ink. You could just wipe it away and do another one, but oops, I got a bit too much on there then, so we're going to have to balance that up a bit. And again, you see how wet this brush is. It's probably a bit too wet, but sometimes you've just got to be a bit braver. And you can't always see where that ink is. It can be dried, or it can, in that case, not be dried, and it looks dry, so but it's just to stop most of that ink being thrown away because I am that tight Yorkshire lass. That's going to be too pink, is that? But that's the true colour of it. So I think we've pretty much cleaned the brush now. Yeah, you can tell that brush is almost clean now. Oh, thank you, Kingo. Yeah, it's a gorgeous pink. This one's called Tickled. And now, again, this is a big brush. Now, if you want them dark, you just go down that little gully there, where it's metal nib to plastic, and you will get your colour, says she. So, as I say, don't ever think, oh, I've started a page and now I can't finish it in the same way, because you can. You don't want to bring out too much colour, but you will bring out some by doing that. But of course, by that time you get kind of right into this way of working with all the other ones. It's nice to throw a little bit of dark in somewhere. And what we're really doing is making a palette for to make these beautiful acrylic inks into a watercolour. So we're kind of doing three things at once. And then you can always go somewhere else that you've not been before to kind of counteract that. Pink. And this is very fast because of course we've got this big damp rigger. But it's nice to know how many different beautiful shades of pink you can get from one colour pen. And of course this is just the reverse of chameleon blendable. Oops, that's a bit strong, that one. This is the opposite of the chameleon blendable pens. They have a solution slowly fed back, and this one is, oh, the colour's there, that's too strong, that. Tap it back a bit. Now if you go back in then you think, actually I don't like that, I like it stronger, then you can go back in. I like all the turnips to be paler, but it's a highlight. And we've got a little bit in the corner here. Might be. there. And then lastly, these last little tiny bits at the bottom. Oh, sorry, Suzanne. There's nothing worse than backache, is there? So I should have some videos up. Hopefully this will upload. But I still don't have any idea why. I've only made one live YouTube video, and I'm banned, so again you can see it's nearly all gone. Tap it back. Oops, so put that back. Oops, that's gone there. So the purple, I'll just zoom out. I'll just move the camera and then I'll show what we've done in this particular way. And just leave it like this. So we've made our colours, and I've been dunking in there and twisting back onto there. So we've made yellow, orange, we've made all those colours. They are drying, but they will come back, whereas if you'd have just put them in there, they would have dried. So in the past, when I've had a blob, I think this is my first page, and I got to the blue and I had a blob. So I coloured the whole of that page in. But this is what I was trying to get with the inky effect. These beautiful inky kind of colours. So that's what I was doing. And I kept having blobs. So that's the pinks we've just done. That was another one that I've used the inky colours with, and mixing two inky colours into one. Really pretty inky colours, but quite bright. That was the second one that I did that I really liked, and that's what gave me the idea for Ivy and the Inky Butterfly. That's when I knew that's what I wanted to use, the acrylic inks. So that was a purple blob, and I've splashed and splattered with it. As you can see, there's tiny splatters everywhere. So, I've had quite a few blobs, and that's when it's blobbed out doing little tiny things. That's it again, I think. That's a purple blob. One blob did a whole page, and I didn't really like, or I didn't really like, but I wasn't inspired to colour the houses, and so every time I had a blob I coloured things in that I wouldn't normally colour, and instead of wasting the ink, I really enjoyed that, really did. Got some lovely watercolour effects. So I've had quite a few blobby moments, have to say. That was the other one we've just done now, that's the red. That was the yellow we did with the yellow one. And that was the red and the orange. Again, beautiful effects that I would never have thought of had I not made a blob mistake. That was a blob on the red one that I did, so I decided to colour. So again, use the same mechanism, went dark to light and dark to light. And I think that looks really well. And that was a blob of red. That was a blob of purple. That was the pink that we've just used when I made that this morning. That's what we've just done. And I think that's it. I think that was done in inks. I think I recognised the pink. And this was the yellow that we did first. So that one was the first one with that really soft, beautiful, soft, pale yellow. So in the box we've got the purple and the blue to do here. I might not do the blue there. I might do a mixture of those two here, I think. And then I'm going to put some blues and greens in here. So we've got two blues, and we've got 2, 4, we've got 6, 8 greens. Actually, I think that brown is called brick, for red brick. I think I'm going to put that actually there, I think. And then I've got 4 left for the greys. I won't do white, but I've got black and 2 greys. And there's a silver, but I don't think I'll do the silver. So as you can see, that one's dried. The others are drying, but the first one's dried. That pale yellow is dry. But hopefully, when I go back in there, you see that's just come back to a watercolour. When you normally dry these inks, they won't, but they will if you have a little bit of water to them. So I can put that on there. And because I've got a touch of water, that will dry, but it'll come back. And then that's how you get these beautiful pale colours from these very, very strong colours. And the inspiration for that is so that when I get the colours in here, I use them for inky splodges for here. So these are the colours. These are Derwent Graphik pens, ink acrylic pens, and with a little bit of dilution they don't bleed through and they don't show through. But the Joanna ones are that little bit thicker, and I've been practicing combining colours together on there. So that was a bit of an insight into how to create and make these acrylic inks into watercolours, or rather water-based inks, so that I can use them instead of using them as a pen. I've got my colours out on a platform. Thank you for watching.